The manhwa begins with showing a map on which a certain area has been marked. It was Gansa province, located in the northwest of China. A place with fertile agricultural lands, rich in useful resources, and the main advantage the Silk Road passes through it. The Silk Road is a caravan road that connected East Asia with the Mediterranean in ancient times and in the Middle Ages. The Iron Knights waged a fierce war with the Gurian bridge for dominance in Gansusan. Then we are shown an estate with a sign, League of the Iron Banner, where a large number of people train inside and there is a person watching them. He was tall, muscular, and looked impressive. He had red hair, and his name was Hikshiden Ziohyangju no Kondo. He tells his students in full that no matter what weapon they use, hand-to-hand combat is the basis of all combat skills. Because the weapon is just a tool, and it is their trained body that pierces, wields, and strikes. Among all the students, we are shown a young guy who gives all his strength to training, and his name was Bongi. And while Kondo was finishing his teachings with the words, "If you don't want to die, be able to survive," we are shown another young man who copes with training easier. He was bigger, more muscular and calmer than Bongi, and most likely much more experienced, and his name was Ban. After all this, the teacher gives the students a short break. They immediately fall from fatigue, as the training was very exhausting. Then Ban turns to Kondo, and asks the question, why would they train if it would be useless and they would die when meeting with Master Murim, who throws knives and shoots straight at the target? Murim is a school that teaches martial arts. The teacher tells him that there is certainly no chance that a low-ranking samurai like you will survive a one-on-one battle with him. However, well-known masters have a great weakness that beginners like them do not have. Ban, listening very carefully, immediately asks what do the beginners have that the masters do not have. In response to which Kondo tells him it's fame, and it shocked the guy because the famous master is famous and isn't it obvious? Kondo begins to explain and at first agrees, but thanks to this they will know in which martial arts their opponent is good, as well as which gun he uses. They will know the weaknesses of their opponent, but he does not know them. This is how you can defeat a master. This is the only way, the teacher finishes explaining. In addition, after lunch he would have time to study the Gurianj masters, which shocked Ban sharply. He was shocked that Kondo was still studying something at his age, and from that Bongi laughed trying to hold back his laughter. Ban got angry and asked the newcomer in red what made him laugh so much. After a while, we are transferred to the streets of the city, namely the market where there is noise from the number of people. They show us a magnificent sword with a red diamond on the handle, and Bongi really liked this sword. He just salivated from him, and the seller turns to the young man saying that he has a diamond eye, since he noticed this legendary sword from the west. The seller says if to tell the truth, he was stuck in a rock for a long time. There was even a legend, whoever pulls out the sword will become king. Strong men fought for him, trying to take him out of the rock, but ironically, the boy managed to do it. And indeed, he then united the country and became the ruler. Bongi was very impressed by the story and asked if it was true. The seller confirms his words, and says that with this sword the guy can become a king, after which the boy asks the price of this sword. Suddenly, someone from the outside says if a king who entered the battlefield with such a trinket would become food for crows. Upon hearing this, the seller turns his evil gaze in the direction from where it was said, and there was an ordinary traveler standing there. Restraining anger, the seller asks how he will comment on carrying a knife that looks like it can kill not only a smart pig, but also a person. But a man with a calm look says, a pig or a man, if you cut bones and flesh, you still kill. This greatly angered the seller that he jumped up, taking the sword in his hands and simultaneously saying that this would not work, since the traveler was trying to destroy his business. The traveler, after looking at him, begins to smile and asks if he is trying to intimidate him with this trinket, and whether the value of the goods will decrease if a couple of scratches appear. Jumping on it, he shouts angrily that it is not a trinket. Their blades collided, and after they already stand with their backs to each other, the traveler held his sword with one hand when the seller was at least one knee away from landing. And at that moment, the seller's sword breaks into two parts and the red stone falls from the handle. But everything was fine with the traveler's sword. While the seller was crying from the loss of the goods, the traveler asks Bongi where the iron banner is, to which he shows the direction saying that he should go straight along the main road. There is a big door there, he will see it. The boy asks in response if something happened to the iron banner, but the wanderer did not hear him and went on telling himself that it seems he has a good day today. The boy admired this guy, and he enthusiastically tells him how cool it was. At this time, one of the parts of the Ban estate approaches the elder and asks what he is reading. The old man replies that this is the art of war, and the guy is interested that the elder quarreled with his grandson again because of a fight. But the old man says that Sun Tzu's law is not only about, as he said, fighting. He also keeps the wisdom to live. The guy doesn't listen to him and asks to lend him the old man's sword, because you never know when you'll get a knife in the back, and he can't wait. The elder asks if there are swords that take away life, and there are ones that save, and which one does he need? Ban was pissed off by this, and he answers him, some kind of not big and as good as possible. The old man at this time has already arrived at the estate, where we are shown how she answers. That he doesn't know the answer to something. He was in the pavilion of the three knights. A man was sitting in front of him filling out papers. He was a little shocked, as he asked which family the wanderer was from, but he did not know. After he explains that he is an illegitimate child, which shocked the man even more. After that, he asked which school the guy studied at, to which he replies that he did not go to any. The man wonders that the guy has no family, no education, and he is silent in response. The man is puzzled by where such a thing fell on his head. And at this time, Kondo and Anso come into the room, and the man at the table was glad to see them. The man reminds them how they said that the Black Banner Party needs replenishment. He tells how this guy came on the recommendation of General Hansab from Chanhabib, and shows them the traveler. Kondo is interested in the name of the traveler, to which he answers as his name is Dae-do. Then they ask for the surname that was before. Anso notices the sword on the back of the guy's belt. He abruptly became more serious, and asked if Dae-do is left-handed. He takes the sword with his left hand, holding it in an unusual way. His hand was opposite to the blade of the sword itself. Anso asked why he was holding the sword in this way, to which he replied that it was more convenient for him. After that, they looked at each other without saying anything, and we are returned to the elder with the Ban. Ban saw Hyangju go out to Goblin Mountain in the morning and train hard, so it looks like he will fight him sooner or later. Then he asks about the participation of their team, to which the elder responds positively. But they don't even have a coach, the guy notices. And during this conversation, he shaves his head, where a snake tattoo is visible on the side of his head. Then Anso and Kondo come in with Dido, and Kondo introduces them to the new team captain. The elder and Ban paid attention to Dido, who was intently examining the team room. At this moment, a very joyful Bongik runs in saying that he brought all the dumplings, holding them in his hands. Noticing Dido, he immediately recognizes him and remembers how he saw him at the market. He is the same wanderer. Everyone abruptly fell silent from surprise, and Ban cut his head while shaving because of the Bongik. After a long time, thunder rumbles on the street, and we slowly mix inside the League of Iron Flame. In the dining room itself, where it was time for food and all the students began to take their own food. There is noise in the dining room from conversations and the number of people. We are also shown the team of the new Captain Dido. Ban says at the table how he doesn't like it, and opposite him is Bongik, who is eating beside himself. Ban looks at him with a terrible aura, and then asks the recruit who is their new commander. The boy did not understand what was wrong with the commanders, and he thinks that everything is fine. The senior disciple listens to him in silence, and then asks if he is here for the second time, but he has already joined the Black Banner for the 8th time. And then he asks if he remembers the last commander, to which the recruit contemptuously answers yes. He looked like Master Murim, and as he was a hero, so he died. And suddenly his new commander asks him what will happen if he also dies famous? But Ban answers, he is not a teammate, and even more so not a hero. He is a Ronin who came here for profit. Ronin is a warrior of the feudal period of Japan, who lost the patronage of his ruler, or failed to protect him from death. Then Ban says if he gives him enough money to have an incentive to risk his life, and he won't hear this again, he promises. And of course, the guy keeps saying, low-ranking samurai like them. And before he could finish, he was interrupted by an elder who told him to eat rice in silence. Otherwise it seemed to him that he was dictating his rules on how to live and eat, wasn't it? He, in turn, began to eat rice, denying what the old man said, and says that he does not want rice, because it tastes better than usual. Bondik notices that Ban did not complain about the taste before, and now he is not happy with this either. But Ban had decided to tell him directly that there is only one reason to feed the soldier full and tasty, and that means that there will be a hard battle soon. Dido also realized this, and just preparing for the battle eats everything that is given. We are taken to a meeting room where a flag with the word steadfastness hangs over the table. Also, a bunch of different people gathered here for a meeting. Somenbek, the head of the Iron Banner, takes his word, who began with the words that the location of the Guriansky Bridge was revealed, to which all those present paid attention, some were even surprised. Anso, in turn, reacted very calmly and without words, listening to the next chapter. But then the right hand of the head of the Sopan takes his word, who took the scroll and opened it on the table. There was a map on the scroll. With a pointer, Sopan shows the place of the bridge and confirms that the forward base of the Gurian Bridge is in Nohosen. Then the man in the blue cape speaks, who suggested that if it's in Nohosen, it's only a day's drive to the same place, and a younger man in a red cape reacted angrily to this. He was angry at the enemy, because they were very arrogant, and were not afraid to go to the threshold of their Iron Banner. After that, the man in the yellow cape who was sitting next to Anso suggested, now that they know where the enemy is, what they are waiting for, they need to strike first. Then the head takes the floor again and says, after 2 days of patrolling, each commander will be ordered to immediately prepare for a general attack, and all the others silently agreed. Then the head turned to Anso so that he did not leave immediately, and asked him if he could immediately gather his people as a backup unit. Anso silently nods, thus giving his confirmation that he can. Suddenly a girl who was sitting one person away from Anso named Hobep asked, is it possible to make such a decision without the consent of the commander? At that moment, the head grinned and replied how well he understood what Mrs. Hobep was talking about. And of course it would be possible to follow the wise decision of the head of Mengju, and without letting the head finish, and his right hand finishes for him. The commander ordered not to interfere, even though he explained the whole situation, and thus, the commander showed disrespect. The girl was a little shocked, because of which she clenched her fist under the table in discontent, and her anger mixed with disappointment was visible on her face. Then we get into a beautiful garden where we see a lot of beautiful roses, and a man takes one of them. He first carefully examined it, and noticed that he wanted to hear the fragrance of a rose. Trying to feel it, he abruptly changed his happy face to an angry and upset one, after which the rose was cut. And seeing her fall, the man smiled as if he did not expect anything else. His face was very drooping. Abruptly, a girl who calls him brother turns to him. Hearing her, he dies in anticipation of her anger. It was Mrs. Hobep, and going into the garden she asks her brother why he does not go to the general meeting. To which he responds by asking if he can do anything without him. He asks him again, is this what the head of the Iron Knights would say? To which he gives her a clear answer, he did not become them of his own free will. It upset her. She finds him very irresponsible, and he starts explaining to her. The only reason he was appointed leader was because he was the last son in their family, explaining to her that he spread his arms showing himself as a moniker. If she was also a man, she would become the head of the Iron Knights, and points her finger at her. This is a fact, and it cannot be disputed. In response, she did not know what to say, but he continued to say that he was sitting in an unwanted commander's chair only because he was born a man. And since she was born a girl, she can't even get married until she turns 30, plus she has to take care of him. Everything he said infuriated her, but she restrained herself and nodded in agreement. After they came out of the garden, 3 girls turned to him. They were looking for their master for a very long time. He smiled at them and left with them, hugging everyone at once. The sister watched this and sighed discontentedly. Further on, they show how she ended up in the water, where she dived very deeply. She tried to stay underwater for as long as possible, after which she emerges and goes on land to catch her breath. She was dusty and drooping from talking to her brother. Suddenly there is some kind of strong explosion in the climb across the river. Deciding to see what it was, she went there, and passing through a dense forest, she notices a man who was training. It was Dido, who was masterfully swinging a sword. His body was pumped up, and you could tell from the scars on his body how many battles he had gone through. Fully concentrating, he trained and abruptly finished standing in a stance. Exhaling, he fits the sword into the scabbard on the back of the belt. Recovering my breath a little, he continued training. At this moment Mrs. Hobep was watching him. She was surprised by his skill and decided to approach him. Approaching, she asks, is he from the Iron Banner? Without noticing her or listening to her, he silently continues training. She takes a closer look and notices the sword, telling him what an amazing sword he has. After that, he stops and pays attention to her, and says that this is his only friend, showing her the sword and running his hand over it. She is interested in the name of the sword, but there is no name. It is enough for Dido to call him a friend. Abruptly, The girl felt cold, as she was all wet after the river. Our hero went to the tree where he left his things, after which he goes back to her and notices how she is shivering from the cold trying to hide it. He's on fire after training. She opens her eyes a little and sees how he throws his cape in her direction. Thinking that he wanted to lend her a cape, she was happy, but in the end he just put it on himself, leaving her to freeze. She was a little shocked, and then he left by walking past her, which shocked her even more. Frozen and upset, she asked the question, "What kind of man is he?" After a while, having come to the place where his squad lives, Bongi approaches him and tells him that a gathering of captains is being held. Dido asks his name, to which the young man joyfully says it, and then wishes him a good trip to the training camp, and the captain leaving modestly thanks him for it. Ban, however, asks with displeasure if he could not remember the names of the 9 members of the team? But the young man answers him that he himself does not call him by his name, and hears him every day in his own direction a recruit. He asks the guy if he doesn't like it, to which he immediately responds positively with a dissatisfied face. Ban tells the truth that one of the women from the brothel, whom he used to often visit, was called May Bongik, to which the young man shouts in response that this is a lie. And then he adds how he sees that they not only have similar names, but also faces, and the guy suddenly believed it and asks if it's true? But Ban suggests to him to call him by his name May Bongik and smiles at this moment. It scared Bongik. A little bit like all the captains gathered in the main meeting room of the Black Banner. Opposite them, the head of the Black Banner avances and gives the floor to Vice Captain Ding Jok. He announces that presumably in 2 days they will make a general attack on the castle on Mount Noho, which the Korean school has turned into its base. A general offensive is the movement of troops forward with the aim of attacking the enemy, defeating him. Ding Jok adds that their Black Banner decided to take a chance and come first, and they set off immediately, and will move only at night. That was all for us, and all the captains silently listened to the instructions and began to disperse. Dido also started to leave, and as he left the hall he was called. Another captain stood in front of him, who saw our hero for the first time, and asked if he was the new captain of the squad of jokers. The guy didn't answer him and just looked at him, and then the man says how glad he is to meet our hero, and he is the captain of the heavenly squad OK Homakhun, and holds out his hand to greet him. But Dido just ignored him and went on, which surprised the captain of the heavenly squad. He was shocked that he was ignored. And he decides to shout in the wake of how impolite it is on his part towards the captain, and does he want to introduce himself? Without waiting for an answer, he continues to say that following Han Song's teachings and behaving so arrogantly, he insults other people greatly. Hearing all this, Dido stopped and turned a little at him with his gaze, asking whose teachings he follows? With his aura, he really scared the captain of the heavenly squad and he can't answer him anything. Dido adds that he believes only his sword, to which he tells him with a high tone how he was put to manage a squad of people who barely survive. And he concludes that the captain of such garbage does not have the right to say anything, but our hero does not listen to him and simply leaves, saying that garbage on the verge of survival is better than a dead hero. A little while later, we see a large detachment of the Black Banner advancing to the battle. They walk forward in the rain in a long chain. Among them are our squad of jokers. I show us a recruit with 2 spears on his back. He walks right behind his captain and looking at his back remembers telling him that he wants to become stronger. To which Dido answers him, if so, then he needs to survive. Readiness for death will not make him stronger. Only efforts to survive will do, the captain explains to the young man. And remembering this conversation, he admires his captain, and suddenly a band blows in his ear. After that, he immediately jokes that he is even more beautiful when he gets wet in the rain, which made the young warrior very angry. The elder closes Bongiku's mouth and shows him to be quiet. And now, on the approach to the destination, the whole Black Banner made a halt. The captains gather to discuss the actions and the conversation begins with Condo. According to intelligence, about a third of the total number of people of the Korean school are located on Mount Noho, he says. Dido asks what about the enemy's base and Condo answers how they have only 9 masters, 3 of whom are now on Mount Noho. The 3rd master is the flirting Ha Hyang-woo, the 6th is the metal pillar Wee Tong Jae, the 9th is the white horse Kong Ku Sim. If these 3 eliminate our captains and the vice captain, they will not be able to cope with any of them. Dido listens calmly and does not interrupt Condo, and he continues, even their captain is not sure that he can handle Ha Hyang-woo, so you better not even meet his eyes. Mak Hun asks again, when meeting with him to run. Kondo also says if someone wants to behave like a hero, then do it your own way. But the purpose of their sudden arrival is to get here before the main military forces attack and cause chaos behind enemy lines, and before the arrival of the main detachment, we are putting all our strength into our survival. Mak-hun decides to offer a slightly different option. Apart from the captain, they have no one with a high position, so isn't it better to take the life of one master than hundreds of bipods? Kondo answers if it is possible, then let him do so. Then Kondo decides to explain the plan of action on the stones and tells, the first and second detachments will break in from the left side, and the third, fourth and fifth from the right. And then he asks who will lead? The captain of the heavenly detachment asks that he be allowed to lead all the detachments. They all abruptly fell silent in anticipation of the answer. Kondo answers very simply and briefly that this is done by a squad of jokers. Everyone accepted it, but the captain of the heavenly squad is shocked by the decision, and after Kondo tells them to start immediately. After the meeting, they disperse to their detachments, and we see Mak-hun baring his teeth at our hero looking after him. Later, somewhere in the mountains, a squad of jokers moves along a thin cliff path, each was tied to each other for safety. The elder who follows the captain thinks that if he touches the cliff with his hand, he immediately falls down. This landslide can be used for an unexpected attack, of course. There is a chance to slide down with the rocks and be buried alive, the old man thinks. A landslide is a sliding displacement of soil and rock masses down the slopes of mountains and ravines, steep shores of seas, lakes and rivers under the influence of gravity. They continued on their way until part of the trail began to collapse and the old man began to fall and pulling the Bongi, which slipped due to a sharp pull and began to fall with him. Ban was able to restrain them. It was hard, but he held on so that the whole squad did not fall with them, and it was necessary to somehow lift these two. The captain also did not fall and held on, but did nothing and was silent. The young man looked down and realized that it took a very long time to fall and pulled himself up from fear and screamed. Ban tells him not to scream, and if he screams, their plan will fail, and they will all die. Even after falling to the ground, he must remain silent and Ban asks if the recruit understood this. Bongi holds onto the rope with one hand and closes his mouth with the other, and looks down. Ban looks at the captain, and mentally asks what they should do. Dido stands calmly and looks at them. He doesn't say anything and just stands and looks down. Abruptly he picks up his sword, and at that moment Ban thought that the captain was going to sacrifice two people, but he took out his sword and hammered it into the wall next to him. With the other hand, he begins to wind the rope around his arms so that it would be easier for them to get up, and the second holds on to the sword. Seeing this, Ban breathes a sigh of relief, and decides that the captain is softer than he thought. The two from below begin to climb behind the rope and the first recruit gets there, to which the Ban reacts by saying that he is well done. Normally he would have screamed, but now he was silent. Then the old man also got up, after which he looks at the cliff where his foot has become. He apologizes to the captain for this, but he just looked at him and didn't say anything. Dido noticed that when he pulled, the weight decreased dramatically, which meant that among these two, one, or maybe both, were studying Qigong. While the captain was thinking about it, Ban whispered to them to get together, and they almost died because of it. Qigong is a set of techniques that allow a martial artist to move with amazing speed, jump high, run on vertical surfaces. Dido decides to move on, as sooner or later he will find out. The elder, in turn, thinks whether or not the captain noticed that he used Qigong. At such an age, he has a debt hanging on him, but it is not yet possible to find out what kind of debt. A few moments later they reached the base. It was an abandoned city that was suitable for a temporary camp. Approaching the place, Dido notices a suspicious silence, which he talks about, after they sat down to discuss what to do next. The captain asks to listen to him and says when the operation starts, they will go back, and asks if they understood his order. The young man was a little surprised by the plan, and he wonders, since they are the vanguard, should they retreat? The captain asks if he did not say that he wants to be stronger, and if he wants to live to the day when he becomes strong, do what he says. The guy waved his head showing that he understood, and after that they finished the discussion. We are transferred to the gate, where our squad started the operation and the captain started moving towards the gate, and everyone followed him. Abruptly, he notices something and gives a handshake about the stops, then orders him to press himself against the wall. No one understands anything and is just waiting for instructions. In another place already inside the town there is Anso and Vice Captain, who says that there is no one. From the other side, Kondo approaches and Ding Jock asks if he has noticed any enemies from his side. To which Kondo replies, no people were seen and either intelligence gave false information about the base, or the enemy has already relocated. After a little thought, Anso gives the order to retreat, and at that moment fire arrows flew. Where our squad was, arrows also flew, and the elder says it was a trap, but the captain is silent. Bongi asks, didn't the captain just order a retreat? Dido says that the recruit should not worry and wait. Immediately after that we see the heavenly squad running away from the town. Mak-hun notices a squad of jokers and does not notice the stone, which causes him to stumble and fall on his face. He raised his face and looked at Dido, and without saying anything, he runs away, frightened further, from where the squad of jokers came from. The elder says that there is a cliff in that direction, but the captain scored on them, and while he was picking up the spear that Mak-hun had lost, he began to explain that it was already a difficult task to get here. If they are attacked when they come down from the cliff, there will be no chance of survival. The young man asks if they can dissuade the heavenly squad, but Dido thinks it's useless. Fear clouds the mind, and at this time a person begins to move instinctively, explains Dido. After the second launch of arrows in their direction, the captain decides to move to the camp until the arrows are launched for the third time and break inside, about which he gives an order to his squad. One of the enemies says how this place on Noka Mountain will become the grave of the Iron Banner, no one will leave alive. However, if they obediently give up and go to his school, then their lives will be saved. But he is not allowed to finish as at that moment a spear flies at him from Dido, which he repulsed. Dido with a squad of jokers attacks the enemy group, saying that anyone who hinders him will die. He orders you to run only forward, even if the enemy gets in the way, and the battle begins. One of the enemies shouts to Bongaku, even though he is still so young, but if he does not kill on the battlefield, he himself will die. Bongaku is scared and can't do anything, but an elder saves him and the enemy's blood gets on the young man's face. After that, suddenly something switched and he remembers the captain's words, fear shackled his mind, and he moved instinctively. After the battle, our squad moves further through the forest, and suddenly Dido stops the squad and shows a place to hide and to take a breath. After examining the area a little and making sure of its safety, he tells the squad to rest and that they patch up while there is time. The recruit was still standing and did not speak. In general, he did not behave as usual. Ban noticed this and decides to praise him by tapping him on the shoulder. He tells him how well he fought and today he was a good fellow. Bongik instinctively attacked Ban with his spears, but Dido stops him and reminds him what he said before. Tra fetters the mind, and the person begins to act instinctively, after which the young warrior woke up hearing the captain's voice. Ban is angry and starts scolding the guy for scaring him. The old man comes up to him and says that his arm was grazed with a spear, but unfortunately the wound is not deep, the rest are ordinary scratches. Waking up and looking at himself, Bongik was shocked by the amount of blood on himself. The elder asks the young warrior, does he not remember anything? To which he turns his head in denial, after which he begins to vomit. The old man watched him and also decided that the young warrior was not an ordinary person. Then the elder comes up to the captain and tells him about the state of the squad, and no one was seriously injured in the end. And it looks like they were the first to escape, and immediately wondered when they were going. The captain replies that they will move out after the arrival of the main forces. The old man thought that they hid here not only from the enemies, but also to allow the main army to attack first. But if the enemy knew in advance about their sudden attack and prepared traps, most likely they are on the way of retreat. He has no idea where they are located, so he wants to send the main army first, the elder mused. Then he asks the captain if they should join them? To which Dido asks the old man, does he really want to become a hero? And he gets a negative answer, and the old man asks in the wake, does the captain think that the main squad will be able to escape? And the captain answers the old man, their leader Anso is not a weakling. Then we see one of the masters against the background of everything burning, he cursed Anso, as he was able to outwit them and leave. Another master man OK approaches him, saying that we Tong Jie should calm down, and they will not be able to leave this mountain alive. Tong Jie begins to smile and says that it really is impossible, since there are only 2 exits from the mountain. We are shown the main army, which barely managed to escape, Anso leads them back and Kondo follows him, pulling arrows out of himself. Kondo turns to the army and asks, "Are these all survivors?" Before the gorge itself, Anso understood that this was a risky option, but there was no other. Starting to run, he ordered everyone to run as fast as they could, after which all the survivors began to run. Running through the gorge, Kondo tells Anso that all this is strange, since there are no ambushes in such a convenient place to escape. But literally after a couple of seconds, when they reach the end of the gorge, they see two torches on different sides of the gorge, and Anso gives an order with his hand so that everyone stops. At the end of the gorge, the third master of the Korean school, Ha Hyang-woo, and his army were waiting for them. He looked mighty and he had put on claws with weapons, and he met Anso's army with a smile on his face. Kondo recognized him and was shocked, calling him flirting Ha Hyang-woo. In turn, Anso pulls out his sword and scabbard and prepares for battle. The master, on the contrary, stepped back a little and gave the go-ahead to the archers, who stood in front of him and prepared to shoot. Anso, looking at them, realizing that apparently they decided to ambush from above the gorge, for an easy victory. But if you manage to take away the torches, there is a chance to escape in the dark. Hyang-woo became more serious because he did not understand what Anso was up to. He in turn takes a step forward and becomes fully revealing himself. The master begins the conversation by raising one hand to greet and addressing the captain of the Black Banner, Anso. He has heard about him as a famous murderer, and now they have met. He offers them to surrender. If they lay down their weapons, the master's army will not shoot at them. Archers stand in a row for a shot, but Anso ran forward and shouted back that it was useless to negotiate. The master is infuriated by his equanimity and bravery, and he gives orders to the archers to shoot. A hail of arrows is flying at Anso, but the captain dodges each arrow with incredible speed. He reached one of the torches and knocked it down, and immediately ran to the second one, dodging the arrows. The master shouts for them to shoot, because he is aiming at the torch. Suddenly, after the master's order, the same torch flies at him. He easily repels it, and Anso appears immediately after the torch. He strikes at Hyang-woo in a jump, but he blocks his attack with his claws, and at that moment all the rest of the Anso army began to attack, with Kondo running at their head. The archers are repeatedly ordered to shoot at them, and a battle ensues. While everyone was advancing and breaking through the ambush, Hyang-woo forced Anso to retreat with every blow. He only defended himself. Suddenly the master's attack from the back, and it was Kondo, but the master dodged by jumping a couple of meters. He did this when he noticed how he was fooled and specially taken away from the exit of their gorge. Anso's army was able to escape, although it lost a few warriors. Feeling the excitement, the master tells himself how he wants to meet Captain Anso again. Sometime after the successful escape from the gorge, Anso's army and he himself reached the forest. Anso was hit by an arrow, but despite the pain, he continued to run forward, and the arrows also hit the back of Kondo, who also endured. While they were running, Kondo examined the wounded behind and realized how many wounded they had. They had to run away from the forest faster, otherwise they would all die from wounds. Having reached the fork in 3 ways, the army began to say that they had succeeded, and finally they left this hated mountain. Everyone was breathing heavily and was injured. Endo was also tired and wounded. And only after putting down his mace for a breather, Anso pulls out his sword again in front of him. After he shows everyone with his sword the direction in front of him, opposite them in front was the cavalry. Kondo was puzzled to see an ambush here, too. No matter how fast they ran, they would not be able to escape from the cavalry. At the head of the cavalry was a young master on a beautiful white horse named Kong Ku-sim. He asks Anso if he is the captain Anso he has heard of? And he's smaller than he imagined, maybe because he looks down on him? These taunts made Captain Anso very angry, and then the master asks his commander if he thinks that the nickname of the killer Anso does not go at all. To which he agrees, and the master says that it makes no difference in general, despite his appearance. They say he is among the 10 strongest people of the Iron Banner League. Anso, having calmed down a little, silently looks at the young master, who has released his chain. He decided to honor him with the honor of dying by the silver chain of Kong Ku-sim's white horse, smiling haughtily as he said this. He begins to twist his chain in preparation for battle, and at this moment Kondo asks the captain to fight him. Anso stops him without saying anything, and began to go himself to a battle that he is likely to lose. Kondo is depressed from not being able to help, and watch as the wounded captain goes forward, and so is already holding a sword with difficulty. The arrogant young master was about to attack when suddenly everyone turned back. Condo also looked back to where a squad of jokers was passing through the army. Everyone stared at them, but they didn't care. Dido asks the elder that apparently there is no way back from here, and the old man replies that if everything is not sorted out here, they will be chased one by one to kill later. In this case, Dido orders his squad to kill their commander and kill the enemy, and everyone went on the offensive. The old man tells Dido that he didn't want to become a hero, and that's right, their commander replied. He's not following the hero's path, he's just trying to survive. They've been running all night long, but after they've dealt with these people, they'll ride their horses. Condo was amazed by the actions of these guys. At this moment the master starts his chain. She flies straight at Bongi, but is stopped by Ban with his spear. The chain spun on the spear of Ban, who says he caught it. But the master, smiling, dies as he sharply knocks on the horse, which has become on its hind legs. Thus he pulled Ban towards him, and the horse began to turn around, while the old man shouts to Ban to throw the spear. But the guy refuses, and if he grabs, he won't let go until he loses all his teeth. The master liked it, and he pulled the chain, thereby forcing the Ban to let go of the chain, and he fell right on the old man. The master took the guy's spear for himself, and looking at the weapon, he says that this weapon really cannot be called beautiful. Suddenly, the commander behind the master shouts to him to be careful. Kusim noticed Dido running at him, and tells him how bravely he acts, and immediately throws the chain in his direction. But our hero dodges and falls under the horse, and she started kicking, which made the master very angry. Watching this, and so realizes what he is doing, Kusim's silver chain moves unpredictably when attacked. That's probably why the commander decided to slip under the horse, where it won't reach, but now horse hooves are a great danger to him. The horse, frightened, began to knock with its hooves. Where Dido was, he risks breaking his bones and damaging his internal organs, and so reflects on this. The master tells the horse to crush him, and Dido pulls out his sword and attacks her. From this, she abruptly reared up and the master falls off the horse. His commander runs up to him, but Bongi stops him, saying that he will be his opponent. So two duels were formed between Dido and Kusim, and the second between Bongi and the commander of the master. We are shown how all four are arranged. The first is the master, who threw off his cloak in preparation for the duel. In front of him was a horse that had fallen on its back, and behind it was Dido, behind whom stood Bongi holding the commander of the master. The master was angry, and watching Dido stand up for battle and taking out his sword, he starts the move first. He draws his twisted chain to himself and abruptly gives its direction with his hand in the direction of our hero, who manages to dodge even though his hair was touched. Unimaginable speed, Dido thought, and abruptly Kusim begins to beat his chain very quickly. The guy only manages to dodge, and abruptly he jumps towards the horse. The chain at this moment hits the horse's head and blows off its head, after which the master begins to approach. With one blow he took off the horse's head, Dido thinks, and looks a little puzzled. The master approaches, telling him that it's his turn now, and begins to rotate his chain in a different way, creating the illusion of a cross in front of him. Dido understands that if he does not rotate this chain in a certain way, he will lose. He spins it to the desired speed and sharply attacks our hero, who manages to dodge and run to the master. But he happily tells him, right here, and abruptly hits the chain with his foot, pointing it straight at Dido. The guy manages to block it with his sword, but the force of the blow was so great that he pushed it several meters away. After landing, Dido barely restrained the blow, thinking how huge the destructive force of his chain was. Immediately after that, the master lifted the chain to the top and with the words that Dido died throws the chain at him, but he dodges. Then there were a couple more similar blows, but he dodged all of them, after which Kusim, twisting his chain, approaches. Approaching, he says that thanks to Dido, he became interested in fighting, and how a low-class warrior who sells his sword for money and has neither ideals nor beliefs can be capable of such a thing. Dido, already out of breath from the battle, looks at him. At this time, we are transported to Bangkok, which was going to fight with the commander of the master. He turned away and noticed how hard it is for his captain now, and the commander will attack him sharply, but the young man blocks his spear with his own. The commander asks if he really looks away from the battle, and the old man thinks what a reckless boy. He fights with short spears against the cavalrymen with a long one. The length of the spear is also important, but the blow struck from above is much stronger than the blow from below. If he wants to have a better chance of winning, he must knock the opponent off his horse, as the captain did. The elder shouts to Bangkok to attack the horse, but the commander asks, do they really think he will allow this to be done? He attacks the guy, but he jumps on top of him and attacks back with 2 spears. The commander dodged, almost falling, but remained on the horse. After that, he starts looking around and can't see the guy, thinking that he is missing. But immediately feels his aura from behind and attacks with his spear. Our young talent surprised him by standing on the very edge of the spear and does not fall. The elder immediately realized that the young man was using the Qinggong technique. Dido also knew that one of them had used it. It was because of him that the rope then became lighter, the captain thought. Jumping away from the spear and landing in front of the commander, he asks what kind of person he is. Watching this, Anso remembers the day when this guy came to them. The day when May Bangkok first came to the Black Banner Party, and we were transferred to the residence of the Iron Banner. The right hand of the head represents the young man Ansu, and Kondo saying that they brought this boy. Kondo asks the guy's name, to which he calmly answers May Bangkok. Then he asks the guy's specialization. He replies that he owns spears, and then they are interested in who trained him, to which the guy did not answer. Anso looked at him and realized that his last name was Mi, and if he owns spears, then is he really a child who grew up in the mountains? We are being returned to the duel where the denouement of the battle will soon come. The commander jumps off his horse and decides to fight on his own 2 feet and standing in a stance prepared for a duel. Anso thinks how a guy made a man with superiority get off a horse. To think that his Qinggong technique imposed on the enemy the idea that it was dangerous at altitude, and at that moment the commander of the master begins to attack. He attacks very quickly with a spear at a distance, creating a peculiar hail of blows, but the young man, blocking and dodging them, approaches the enemy, and thus was able to counterattack. At this time, Dido has a hard time against the master. He decides to attack again, to which he reacted and again sent the chain to our hero with his foot and touched his face. Immediately after that, he sent a second blow, and hit him right in the face near the edge of his left eye. From the force he was thrown back again, Anso at that moment began to get nervous and the young man was also worried about the captain. But Dido was still standing alive. Getting up from his knees, he looks at the enemy, and there is blood on his face. The master tells him that he is still standing after hitting his chain in the head, and recognizes his endurance. He suggests that he end his childishness and end it finally. Lowering the chain, he changes its tip to 5 prongs, and says how he will finish it with his chain. Dido also understands that his mind is beginning to fog up and he urgently needs to do something, and he cannot lose consciousness at such a moment, and repeats to himself that he needs to think. The master at this time slowly approaches in order to finish the duel. Our hero begins to think. The range of rotation of his weapon can increase and decrease, and the attack interval is arbitrary. When the chain is long, he can see the movement of the tip and dodge it, but when he reduces the length, along with this reduces the range of rotation, the speed becomes higher and it is harder to dodge. If he runs closer and tries to increase the chain, thus slowing down its speed, it will simply knock Dido down. And it is dangerous to reduce the distance between them in this way. In this case, he decides to attack him and runs in his direction. The master hits him with the chain, but he dodges and goes on, but stops abruptly because of the chain that wrapped around his arm. But this is what our hero was trying to achieve. If he can't get closer, then he pulled him to himself. And he starts pulling on the master's chain, but he smiles because he has a trump card. He takes out the second chain and says that it seems Dido does not understand that it is useless to reduce the distance. He starts twisting the second chain. At this time Dido takes the sword with the other side and twisting throws it at the master. He, in turn, beats off the sword with the second chain and asks that throwing a weapon at him is the last thing he is capable of. Saying that he will put an end to this, he attacks him with a chain, but our hero stops her with his hand, which surprised everyone very much. After shedding some blood, the master tells him how bored he is, but he was suddenly pulled by the chain. He notices how Dido stopped his chain with his hand. He couldn't believe how he managed it. The elder explains that his weapon becomes strong if you spin it with great force for a moment, and then reduce the radius, thus increasing the speed of rotation. From the very beginning, A chain with a small rotation range could not gain enough power, says the old man. At this moment, Dido attacks with screams. The master in a stupor cannot believe what is happening. In it the captain hits him on the head with his own chain. Thus, he wins the battle against the master, breaking his head. This shocked the master's commander, and after Kusim falls, Dido starts beating him with his chain. After that, the commander gives the order to attack the Anso army and our heroes with the whole army. Anso gets into a fighting stance and Kondo has had enough rest, so he will also fight. Ban, having caught the courage from the battle, shouts to everyone, "Let's all die today." The cavalry launched an attack and a battle began between the remnants of the Anso army and the cavalry. They galloped past, killing a lot of Anso people, after the commander calls on his soldiers to stop beating around the bush and attack all at once. They turn around to attack, but suddenly the cavalry of the Iron Banner appears in their back, which attacks them with a banner where it says steadfastness. And after we are transferred to the assembly hall of the Iron Banner, where the assistant deputy head arrived with a report. The deputy head sits and assumes that the assistant came with bad news. Further, the assistant says that the plan for a surprise attack was a failure. The Korean school learned about their strategy in advance, and the members of the Black Banner, driven into a dead end, tried to escape, but were killed because of a trap set on the way back. 207 people took part in the surprise attack. Among them 154 people died or disappeared. 22 are seriously wounded, 31 have minor injuries, and a total of 53 warriors escaped. If the main army had been late, no one would have survived. When it joined the Black Banner, the Korean school cavalry army retreated, that is, disappeared from the battlefield. This is the worst defeat since the creation of the Iron Banner. Nevertheless, even in such a desperate situation, they were able to kill the master of the Korean Kong Kusim school. The head is interested in who did it, Anso or Kondo, to which he receives the answer that it was only the captain who did it. This surprised the deputy head. The deputy says that it was the new captain of the squad of jokers, a man named Dido. In his squad of 10 people, 7 survived, and it has relatively the highest survival rate. The deputy head is interested in this guy, and the assistant asks if he should find out more about him. The deputy head responds positively, as this may come in handy later. And discussing all this, he draws attention to the fact that the information was checked twice or even 3 times. The flawlessly prepared operation for a surprise attack failed. This means only one thing: that there was a leak of information, which is confirmed by the assistant. The deputy head assumes that with the exception of the leadership, no one else knew about her, so there is a spy inside the League of the Iron Sign. Then they show us the gorge where the mountain of corpses lay after the battle. Suddenly, one of the corpses stood up with a deep breath of air, and it was the captain of the heavenly squad OK Ho Mak-hun. He looked around where he was, began his movement somewhere. After we were transferred to the mining town in the gorge, it was a red gold gorge in Gansa province, the main headquarters of the Korean school. They show us the girl who repaired the pumping engine, and did the job, says that now it should work. She was the deputy head of the Korean Dok Ko Jeongkon school. She tells the other mechanic to pull the lever, and then the engine started. As a result, an elevator was started, on which ore was transported and an employee with ore arrived on it. The old employee says if something went wrong, he thinks he would be able to down there. They answer him that everything turned out thanks to the deputy head, and at that moment the deputy head comes up and says that fortunately they fixed everything. By herself, she was not tall with white hair and red eyes, but she had a huge influence on the city. If there is a problem with the mechanism again, do not hesitate to call her, the girl asks. She is most familiar with the devices she made herself. At this moment, a guy runs up calling her, after which we are transferred to the hall. A girl was already running through the hall to the room where her father was. Opening the door, she turns to him. In the hall sat all the masters who were on a mission on the mountain against the Iron Sign, and she comes to the table. We are shown her father, the head of the Korean school, Emperor Dok Ko-hong, who was puzzled. Approaching the table, the girl was shocked to see the chains on the table, which meant only one thing. She couldn't believe it and started screaming at the whole hall out of sadness. After a couple of days since the Black Banner returned to the League of the Iron Sign, we are shown how Mak-hun is heading for the entrance. The guards blocked his entrance, and he says that they should tell him that the captain of the heavenly detachment from the Black Omen Party, OK Ho Mak-hun, has come. But the guards let him open, saying that they know who he is, so they let him pass. Once inside, he hears how they are discussing the last battle in which the new captain of the Joker squad killed the master of the Korean school Kong Ku-sim. Passing on, he hears the delight of people. They were surprised that some captain defeated the master. Is this possible? The master was one of the 9 best, and this makes that captain amazing. How did he manage to win? What martial arts did he use? The other one heard how he killed Kong Ku-sim with his own silver chain, and says how amazing this captain is. Everything he heard shocked Mak-hun, and he, the captain of the heavenly squad, is ignored, thus insulting him, and passing by the place of life of the squad of jokers, he looks at them angrily. Inside, the elder treats the captain's wounds and asks what if he is promoted to deputy leader for this victory. To which Dido replies that it was just a battle for survival. If he is offered a promotion, he will refuse, because then he will not have the right to run away. Anyway, the elder is grateful that he survived. This is enough for him as a low-class warrior. After finishing the dressing, Dido tells him that this is also enough for him. At this time, Mak-hun came to the habitat of the heavenly detachment, where it was empty and there was nothing, and the completely drooping captain sits down on a bench. Suddenly someone comes up to him and says that he, the captain of the heavenly detachment, is being summoned by the deputy head. Going there, Mak-hun asks the escort to wash and change clothes before the meeting, but he silently goes on. Having come to them, he introduces himself with a title and a name, and says that he is glad to meet with the deputy head. The deputy head can hardly contain his anger, and asks the attendant if it is him. He responds positively, after which the deputy head asks the assistant what he thinks, why he returned with such courage. It seems that he does not realize that his true face has been revealed, the assistant suggests. The deputy head considers it disgusting, but Muchan explains that in the midst of the battle on the cliff, he was buried under a mountain of corpses and barely survived. The deputy head says they will hold a meeting in the afternoon, after they have gathered enough evidence to force him to confess. The escort accepted the order, but Mak-hun does not understand what he owes to confess and wants to ask about it. But the escort grabs him by the throat and takes him away without letting him understand. The deputy head tells the assistant not to connect the internal investigation about the spy with the result of the meeting held recently. He obeys the order. Although this failed plan helped to remove the head of the party, but in reality the rat is still annoying running under his feet, says the deputy head. How is the investigation on Dido progressing? The deputy head is interested, to which the assistant answers him that he is collecting evidence, and will bring him a report during the day. The deputy head accepted this and allowed the assistant to go. Leaving and closing the door behind him, the assistant smiles maliciously, because he knew that the deputy head was not so stupid as to believe that Mak-hun was a spy. Then he collects information about Dido from different people. One told when he belonged to the Changhong school, fought with him during the conflict of 6 schools. He did not know martial arts well, but he fought surprisingly well. As far as he remembers, Dido killed some good warriors from the union of the 6 schools. The assistant asked about the age of the guy then. He was then about 16. The next one said that Dido is very famous because he fought in different places, always walks with his unnamed sword of a strange shape, and it's surprising that he hasn't been killed yet, given that he uses a technique without any origin. The next one told me that wherever Dido went, he always achieved something. It's strange that he never held a high position. And the commanders didn't always like him, and maybe it's because he has a rebellious look? Then the next one said that Dido killed 3 people among the elders. Although he owns low-class martial arts, but death is kind to him, he somehow kills opponents who are much stronger. Somehow they all gathered to grab him alone and thought they had driven him into a dead end, but he ran away like a ghost. But now, since Dido is on the same side with him, he will endure, but later, when I meet him as my enemy, I will kill him with my own hands. Then they asked the person who recommended him by the name of Han Song, who confirmed that he recommended him. The assistant asks to tell something about him if of course Han Song knows, and behind Han Sun was a hob who heard the conversation. The dream says that it's strange when the person who recommended him says this, but he doesn't know much about him. He goes on to tell how they met when he was escorting a group of merchants. And we are transported to the moment where a group of merchants led by Han Sun are walking through the forest. And merchants turn to him. He is interested in what is the matter. They tell him to be careful, because there is a den of bandits ahead. They are sure that there will be an ambush on their way. Han Song also asks them not to worry, as they are protected by the flag of the Iron Banner League, and not a single robber will attack them at the sight of this flag. The second merchant asks if they lose something, will the League reimburse them for it? But the dream did not answer and got a little angry. Then he looks ahead and gives the go-ahead with his hand to stop. There were a lot of corpses lying in front. The merchants assumed that these were bandits, and whose opponent were they fighting? One of the group's people shouts that he has found a survivor, and Han Song approaches there. There, leaning against a stone, Dido lay covered in wounds and dirt. Han Song introduced himself to him, and asked him what he was doing here. Rising to his knees and spitting out blood, he says how he stumbled upon the robbers. The dream sees only their corpses and asks who did all this. Dido tells how he was just walking by, but they blocked his way, saying they didn't like his look. Surprised, the dream asks, did he really kill them all? To which he replies that he killed one, and then everyone attacked him alone. And after they cured him, he wanted to repay, and Han Song told him that he could come to the League and help, but he didn't think he would really do it. Since then all the bandits were killed in that area, they terminated the deal with a group of merchants. But since it is difficult to earn a living, sooner or later new ones will appear, after which the dream laughs. The assistant was a little puzzled by the stories, and at this moment a girl approaches asking, is this a story about the new captain of the squad of jokers? The assistant confirms this, and says, a guy named Dido. The more he learns about him, the more he doubts that such a person could kill Kong Ku Sim. Hobep assumes that he is just lucky, but the assistant believes that since he is in such a situation, he probably is not. The girl says, although he lost a lot, but he really managed to defeat the master of the Korean school. And the assistant confirms this, Dido did it, although he did not know how much luck he still had left, and at the same time he smiles maliciously. And ends the conversation by saying that now he will have to pay for it. Then they show us a bag with silver, where there were 10 silver coins. Dido looks at the coins and says what a generous Iron Sign League, he just ran away from there, and they decided to reward him. Banguk also believes that he destroyed one of the 9 masters of the Korean school, but only received 10 silver coins. Further, he is happy that Dido continues to be their captain, showing it on his face. Band believes that he is already lucky that they did not have time, because he is responsible for the plan for a surprise attack, which failed. The young man says it happened because there was a leak of information, and why the Black Banner Party should be held responsible, since they are the victims here. Then a bag of silver arrives to him and the captain asks Banguk to take this money and go buy all the members of the Black Banner Party drinks and meat. And he asks Band to go with him and make sure that this money is not stolen. Band grabs the recruit as he calls him, and they left, in a good mood. Dido and the elder remained in the room of the squad of jokers. The old man was washing tools after treating the captain's wounds, and Dido was sharpening his sword. The old man noticed how the captain was sharpening his sword, to which he remained silent. After that, the elder suggests that in this way, he also sharpens his mind, but our hero does not respond. After the old man says that now the meeting of the commanders is in full swing and he is worried about the commander of the condo party, they are both not in the best shape. The commanders gathered in the assembly hall, and they were discussing Mak Hun. The sister of the head asks if Mak Hun is a spy from the Korean school. The assistant replies that everything is true and he confessed everything, but the girl does not believe. It's hard to believe, wasn't he the one who tried the best to achieve the goals set by the League? The assistant suggested that maybe he was trying to rise to a high position in the organization in order to get the necessary information? If they appreciated his merits, and he was sitting at this table with them now, then he could not imagine what would have happened, to which the girl does not know what to answer. We are taken to a shop where Ban and Banguk come in. Sraz enter the shop. Ban asks for booze and meat of the best quality. Banguk asks, maybe they won't take too expensive, after all, they need to buy for all party members. But Ban explains to him that there are only 50 people left in the party, and among them 20 are bedridden and can only eat porridge, and the young man finally got it. We are returned to the meeting hall, where the deputy head says that the spy is to blame for the failure on Mount Noho, so they will not bring the Black Banner Party to justice. However, there will be no more replenishment in it, which shocked everyone. And Kondo says, with the exception of those seriously wounded in battle, only 30 people are able to fight, and that's the number. The assistant also suggests, if so, then we can disband it, and distribute the remaining participants to other parties. And then we are taken to the room of the squad of jokers, where Dido is lying and resting, and the old man assumes that if the commander did not return, the meeting was delayed. Dido says it's not surprising that this big plan failed because of an infiltrated spy. The elder notices that his face does not really show that he is angry. Dido replies that he is not so simple-minded as to be angry about this. On the contrary, it would be strange if there was no betrayal or conspiracy. The old man wonders if the captain will leave it just like that. He's just a squad captain, there's a spy. No, it's none of his business, Dido answers. The old man answers this. When the ship sinks, the passengers have no choice but to sink with him. Soon this problem will affect him. But the captain thinks if the ship is sinking, then let it, since he is not his ship.